talking about cultures before in the Earth cooling, back to episode whatever it was, about the Earth spinning through space as a star and cooling off, and then the amoeba theory, which is kind of a lark, but I still like it. By the way, the amoebas in the valley decide to unionize, not sure if I mentioned that, to engage in collective bargaining, to get a better life for them, get the amoeba on the hill to cough up some more dough and better working conditions and pensions and health and welfare and all sorts of other services, especially to musicians, I might add. So we can be thankful for the Musicians Union, the American Federation of Musicians affiliated with AFL-CIO. I've been a member since I was 15 or 16. My high school music teacher, one of them, took a few of us to a union meeting. I think he paid our dues to get us set up, our initiation fees, and I've been a union member ever since. Haven't done any picketing, although I probably should have or could have. I've just been a supporter. And I try to do union jobs whenever I can. I'd like to do more. So let's see. So back to the first human who existed somewhere on the Earth in this vast time spectrum of millions of years ago, a lot of years ago, and that through procreation, there were more humans, and the humans adapted to their environment, the amount of sunshine, the presence of water, the vegetation, and all of that affected how the humans thought, felt, and believed as individuals, and then as couples and also as groups, and how they selected their leaders, tribal chiefs and the like. And so if we look at a meeting of the United Nations, which is very difficult to do, they don't seem to televise that too much. It's possible to look at people from countries all over the world and see that the facial features are distinctive and other physical characteristics, and the way people think, feel, and believe is distinctive, and the expression of music is distinctive as well. It seems to me that cultures go first to percussion instruments, just banging on them to create the sound, and then creating rhythmic patterns. Over here in the West, we put them in patterns of 2, 4, 8, 16, generally speaking, some in terms of triplets, which was thought under Christianity to be related to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the Trinity, and it was therefore more pure than the duple rhythms we have, 2, 4, 8, and 16, etc. But other countries come up with rhythmic patterns that do not fall into those patterns. It could be a 2 and a 3 and a 5 and a 2 and a 3 and all sorts of mixtures. And that then these different levels, each instrumentalist could play their own pattern, and they all overlap in a contrapuntal form, which means one musical line being played at the same time as another musical line, sometimes consonantly and sometimes dissonantly, speaking of rhythm rather. So a consonant rhythm would be everybody playing the same rhythm, and dissonant would be people playing different rhythms at the same time. And so for myself, when I'm sitting at the piano, which is a Western instrument, Western civilization, I don't mean country and Western, although we should probably talk about that at some point. Music of Western civilizations, I'm thinking Western Europe and North America, that these pieces of music have their own patterns. We talked about that with the song forms. And there's a regularity to these, at least to my consciousness, ways of interpreting these patterns. And they can be soothing. They reduce my dissonance and make me more calm because I'm used to this format. Whereas when I'm listening to music from other countries, I struggle with them intellectually to take them in, and also to be able to become part of that culture and reach out to it and reach inside it respectfully, I hope, and figuratively, maybe even literally, to be able to know more about what that culture is. and how it juxtaposes with what I'll call my culture. And with people migrating around the world thousands of years ago, or even hundreds of years ago, there's been a cross-pollination. Cultures coming over on conveyances. When they check your immigration documents and passport at the airport, they don't check you for your musical, cultural appreciation or preference. That just comes in with the person. We get to find out about that later. So there are groupings in cities, Little Tokyo and other little areas, and each of those have their own style of music. When I was a child, I lived next door to a university where students would come in from all over the world to take classes and work on their degrees and get their degrees. And some of the families in the area would open their doors to the foreign students, inviting them in at Thanksgiving when it was too costly for them to fly back to their country. So we had a number of people from other countries coming into my home and sitting at dinner, and I would ask them questions about their life and their hometowns. And I would also rush with great enthusiasm to my bedroom to get the globe of the earth and bring it out and sit there on the couch next to them and ask them to point out their country. It was awesome to be able to spin the globe around and say, well, it's over here. Some of the globes these days are topographical as well. They show the mountain ranges. The mountain ranges and oceans really affected how people could move from one area to the next, often leaving them in one particular place and having to adapt to that. No water or back-breaking sun. And so out of those came a culture. There was this guy who was on the radio who apparently had the ability on his radio show. He would invite people to call in around Thanksgiving, speaking of Thanksgiving, and the caller would, upon request, say what they had for Thanksgiving dinner, cranberry or whatever it was, and the guy could tell them based on what they had for Thanksgiving where the person lived. So I've thought about that in terms of the kind of music that somebody will play to be able to tell where they're from and almost to the town that they grew up in. I'd like to become better at that, but maybe I can inspire the listeners to the podcast to do that, and perhaps you already can. I hope so. Looking at the music that I'm exposed to here, I consider myself to be classically trained because that's how I grew up in my most musically formative years of adolescence. I was mainly studying classical music, except there was a song called Hang On Sloopy and Louie, which both used the same chords. House of the Rising Sun was one that I learned to play by listening to it on an LP, which stands for Long Playing Album for those millennials who don't know. Due respect. And we had a band that played, I think it was in grade 8. I played for a school dance, and we played those songs, and they were very well received by our enthusiastic peers. And that's been a tradition and trend ever since, that it was possible to get positive recognition from a lot of people by playing my music. It said that Duke Ellington had a choice of becoming a musician or being a painter, and that he chose music because there would be adulation for him there and not so much as a painter. Sorry, painters. And we're getting to it now. Perhaps some painters will like to write in and talk about the adulation that they've received just to balance this, and I'll work that into future podcasts. Give painters more due, as they should have. And the rest of, I've been, on the one hand, enthusiastic to move my fingers from one set of notes to another, to change cultures. But more and more, I'm aware that each culture is unique for a reason. And when we were comparing groups in the fifth social psychology, there are vast groups of people who like a particular style of music. I'll choose rap music being one. I'll choose country music as another, country divided into contemporary country and traditional country. And each of these groups have their own set of suppliers and vendors food choices, ways of speaking, and leadership. And often the leadership will exhort their members and require loyalty, if not obedience, in a Milgram level to the ideology of the group. And usually there's a treatise that's written down, a constitution, or even a manifesto if the group is more defiant, almost militant. And by having this manifesto, it can be referred to and built on and relied upon even more than having individuals speak about it. The Bible would be a good example. The Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of California, so people go back to it regularly for guidance as to how to make decisions, which way to go now. Same applies that there are musical constitutions and conventions, not the kind you go to at the LA Convention Center, but conventions, ways of doing things that are acceptable and those that are not. And this is how the leaders of the group control the group and fundraise on it. Some groups go so far as to despise other styles of music and in that way try to make their own group tighter. And if they create a sense of fear of the outside group, the insiders will donate money for their preservation and safety. I'm going to pause there. It's a rather intense topic. I try to be as open as possible. I guess everybody prides themselves in being open, especially with the as possible on there, but there's a variety. If we compare down, we say, hey, I'm more open to other cultures and ideas and other kinds of music than that guy way down there. And I'm less so to that guy or person way up there. So I'm aspiring upwards at all times and partly using this podcast as part of my search to do so. This concludes episode 14. I hope you enjoyed it. We're getting into deeper stuff now. I hope you're cool with that. Has to be done. I welcome contributions. We welcome contributions. Please see the description and chip in. Send us some dough. That'd be nice, not just for the dough, but for the affirmation that you think this is worthwhile, as we do. Emails are welcome, davidwheatley10@gmail.com, and I look forward to hearing from you in all ways. Thanks for joining us.